Hello, nice to see you again. I enjoyed sharing time with you reading Thomas and the Great Kitchen Fire. Today we are going to meet another one of the children in Thomas's neighborhood. Her name is Zoe. Just like Thomas, Zoe found the thinking tree to be a perfect place to get away and think about problems, things that concerned her, things she did not understand. One day, Zoe found herself frustrated because she could not understand a request made by her parents. Do you ever get frustrated because you do not understand why certain rules are put in place? If so, I think you might really enjoy today's story. Find a delightful place to sit where you're comfortable, take out your book, and just as a reminder, when you hear this sound, you will know it's time to turn the page. Now take out your book and look at the cover. You'll see Zoe there praying in the beautiful woods. Okay, let's get started. Zoe ran along the path as quickly as she could. Sometimes it made no sense. You try to do a good deed and people just get angry. I don't understand what the big deal is, Zoe said to herself. Finally, she came to the tree. She always came here to hide, think, and, well, get out of everybody's way. Thomas had shown her the tree when she was just 5. Now she too found it a place to think, here, under the thinking tree. As she collapsed to the ground, Zoe began to shake. Her heart hurt from being so misunderstood. She laid her head down and cried herself to sleep under the comforting branches of the thinking tree. Wake up, child. Zoe roused to a gentle voice. Wake up, Zoe. She opened her eyes to see Nona, or at least that's who she thought it was, standing over her. Nona was Thomas's grandma. All the kids claimed her as their own and called her Nona. She was kind and always listened to everything you had to say. What was she doing here? Hello, Zoe, Nona said. Why are you lying here? You look like you've been crying. May I sit with you for a moment? I've been walking a bit and I need to rest. Zoe sat up and helped Nona sit down on a log next to the tree. Well, Nona, I'm confused and sad. I just do not know what to do. It seems like everything I do is wrong, even when I try to do a good thing, Zoe replied. Would you like to talk about it, Zoe? Nona asked. Zoe looked at Nona and told her the whole story. Mom and Dad told Joy, Faith, and me that if we did our assigned chores promptly, we could get ice cream at Froggy Doodle's. Faith and I got right after our chores and finished in no time, but Joy, ugh, she's so slow. So I decided I would help her do her chores so we could get ice cream. Nona looked at Zoe quizzically. That sounds like a good idea. So why are you crying? Well, Mom and Dad had told us we could not help each other. This time they wanted us to each do the work we had been given without being helped. That did not make any sense to me. Who cares who does the work if it gets done? Zoe asked. Zoe's lip quivered. When Mom and Dad found out I did Joy's chores for her, they said, "No ice cream for anyone." I was so mad. I threw my broom down and ran out of the house. Nona gazed kindly at Zoe and waited. I don't understand, Nona. What did I do wrong? Zoe asked. Are you well rested, Zoe? Would you like to walk with me a bit? There's something very special I'd like to show you, Nona said. Sure, Nona. A walk would be nice, Zoe replied. They stood up and started walking and walking. In fact, they walked deeper into the forest than Zoe had ever gone. As they walked, Nona told Zoe a story about a man named Saul from the Bible. In 1 Samuel 13, there's a story about a man named Saul. Saul was the king of Israel. He was a tall, handsome man. The people of Israel had demanded God give them a king, even though God wanted them to accept him as their king. God told the prophet Samuel to anoint Saul to be king. Samuel did as God asked. And now there was a rule in Israel that before going to battle, the king was supposed to have Samuel come and do a sacrifice and ask God whether they should fight and to bless them in battle. Nona, Zoe said. Yes, dear. I think the path ends here, Zoe replied. Yes, it does, Zoe, but if we keep walking along this very faint path, it will lead to something very special. Should we keep going, or do you want to turn back? Nona asked. Zoe looked around. The woods looked a bit scary. The trees were close, and it was dark ahead. She looked at Nona, who gazed down at her with a loving smile. Okay, Nona, if you think it's okay, then I want to keep going, Zoe said. Would you like to hear the rest of the story, Zoe? Nona asked. Yes, please, Zoe responded, although she was not sure why this mattered to her right now. One day, the army was about to go to battle, and Saul had sent for Samuel, Nona continued. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited. In fact, he waited for 7 days. Finally, Saul was tired of waiting, so he did the sacrifice himself. As soon as he finished, Samuel arrived, and Saul told him he had done the sacrifice because he was afraid the people would leave. Nona looked at Zoe. Was this a wrong thing or not, Zoe? Zoe stopped on the path and looked at Nona. Well, Nona, it was bad because God had said that only Samuel could make sacrifices. And Saul got impatient and would not wait. He disobeyed God. Yes, Zoe, you're correct. And that very day, Samuel told Saul that because he would not obey God, that God was going to take the kingdom away from him. Nona continued. Zoe took Nona's hand in hers as they walked on in silence. I disobeyed Mom and Dad, didn't I, Nona? Said Zoe. Yes, dear, you did, Nona replied. But I don't understand why helping Joy was wrong, replied Zoe. Well, that's the thing about obedience, Zoe. Sometimes it doesn't make sense why, but God asks us to trust him. He has a good reason, even if it is not clear to us, Nona mused. Now, before I show you the surprise, I want to tell you another part of this same story. Is that okay with you, Zoe? Asked Nona. Yes, I would like to hear more if it will help me to understand, Zoe said. I think this will help, Zoe, Nona said as she continued. In 1 Samuel 16, we read that Samuel was very sad about the situation with Saul. After a while, God asked Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul?" And then God told Samuel to go and anoint a new king, one of the sons of a man named Jesse. Jesse had a lot of sons. Nona continued. When Samuel arrived, Jesse lined up 7 of his sons. Samuel looked at the oldest and said to himself, "This is the new king. He is so tall and handsome." But God said, "Do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." "Nona," Zoe said, "that seems a bit confusing." Nona smiled at Zoe and nodded. "To us it does seem confusing. But it gets even more confusing when you read the rest of the story. You see, Zoe, as it happened, God said no to every one of the sons standing before him. As you can imagine, Zoe, even Samuel was a bit confused. Samuel asked Jesse, "Is this all of your sons?" Jesse responded, "No, the youngest is in the field with the sheep, but he's just a child." Samuel told Jesse to send for his youngest son, and they waited until he came in. And when Jesse's youngest son arrived, God told Samuel to anoint him. That son was King David, who was the greatest king of Israel and the direct ancestor of Jesus, our king. Zoe looked at Nona in astonishment. "You mean King David was the last one, and Samuel didn't even want to anoint him?" "That's right, Zoe. But if you notice, in both stories, Samuel did exactly what God asked. Even though with Saul it made him sad, and with Jesse's other sons it did not make sense," Nona said. By this time the little path was getting fainter, and Zoe was not sure there was even a real path. She began to think Nona was lost. "It's just around this corner, Zoe," Nona said, with a bit of a glint in her eye. They walked around a small clump of trees, and there in a small clearing was the most beautiful tree she'd ever seen. The tree stood straight and tall as she could see. The leaves were green like every other tree, but the bark on this tree was not like any tree bark she had ever seen. The bark was all the colors of a rainbow. It looked like someone had painted the tree with rainbow sherbet. It was beautiful. Zoe let go of Nona's hand and started to move closer to the tree. She just wanted to touch that lovely bark. "Stop, Zoe," Nona said in a firm but kind voice, a voice that held in it a sense of urgency, one she'd never heard from Nona before. Zoe stopped and turned around. "Why, Nona? I just want to touch it. What a lovely tree," Zoe said. "Zoe, I want you to turn around and walk back to me," Nona said. Zoe looked at Nona and then at the tree. Then she thought of Saul. Zoe turned and walked back to Nona slowly and reluctantly. "Why, Nona? I don't understand," said Zoe. Nona looked into her eyes and said, "Zoe, because I know something about that tree that you do not." Nona explained that tree is a rainbow eucalyptus, and though it is beautiful, it is very poisonous. Notice how it is in a place alone, It grows in such a way as to choke out other plants so that it can live and grow. It changes the very soil it grows in so other plants cannot compete with it. Also, its leaves are toxic to most animals. If an animal eats the leaves, they will be sick or die. Well, okay, except for koala bears, but that's another story. The rainbow eucalyptus is also toxic to humans. It can irritate your skin, and if you eat the leaves, it will make you sick. In small amounts, it can be helpful. But if you do not understand the characteristics of this tree, it can be very harmful. So just like with Samuel, things are not always what they seem, said Zoe. Yes, dear, said Nona. For a while, Zoe sat looking at the beautiful tree. It was lovely. But now, as she looked at it, she understood that it was not as it seemed. Although beautiful, there were other aspects of the tree to be considered, just like helping Joy. She might not understand why Mom and Dad made the rule, but she still needed to obey. Nona, Zoe eventually said, why do you think Mom and Dad did not want me to help Joy? Nona looked at Zoe. I do not know, dear. Think a bit. Why do you think they did not want you to help her? Zoe thought for a moment, and then her eyes lit up. I know, Nona, I know, she said. Joy is the youngest in our family, and Faith and I are always helping her do things. Because we help so much, she's not learning to do things on her own. Mom and Dad wanted Faith and I to figure out that when we think we are helping Joy, we're not really helping her. She needs to learn to do things on her own. And if we help all the time, she will not. That sounds like a reasonable conclusion, Zoe, Nona said. Well, it's time to head back home. It will be dark soon, and your mom and dad will be worried. The trip back to the thinking tree was shorter than the trip to the rainbow eucalyptus. Nona, I think I'll sit a bit before heading home. I need to think about some stuff, Zoe said. Okay, dear. It was nice to see you, and I hope you figure out the things on your mind, Nona said as she walked away, waving goodbye to Zoe. Zoe sat under the tree for a while, thinking about Samuel, Saul, King David. She thought about Joy and her own actions. After a while, she stood up and looked into the beautiful pink sky as the sun was setting. Then she got on her knees and prayed, Lord, when I helped Joy, I really did not do it for her. I did it for me, much like Saul did the sacrifice for his own benefit. Just like Saul disobeyed you, I disobeyed Mom and Dad. When I looked at the situation just like Saul, who ignored Samuel's guidance about the sacrifice, I was looking with my understanding and not trusting that Mom and Dad had a good reason for their request. You chose King David not because he was handsome, but because you could see in his heart how much he loved you and that he would obey you. Forgive me, Lord, for disobeying Mom and Dad. As Zoe opened her eyes, to her astonishment, there was a beautiful double rainbow in the sky. She laughed out loud. As she ran home to talk to Mom and Dad and tell them all she'd learned, she thought to herself, God gave me that rainbow so I would remember how much he loves me. Regardless of those times when I do not obey, he will forgive me. He loves me, and the beauty in the world is one way I can see his love. Skipping home, Zoe realized she did not even miss the ice cream. This gift from God was much better. The end. Sometimes it's hard to understand the rules, things like obeying your parents or being kind to your siblings. can seem confusing when we don't get what we want. However, God knows what we need to be truly happy, and His Word is meant to guide us so that we can be happy and safe. We can always trust God's Word and His direction. I hope you enjoyed the book. Be sure to check out images of the rainbow eucalyptus. They're such lovely trees, but not ones you want in your backyard. Be sure and scan the QR codes in the back of your book for extra bonus content. In our next adventure, I will introduce you to a young man named David. David was a precocious young man. He was 10 years old and the oldest boy in his family. Now, putting that in context, he had 6 older sisters. David loved to try new things. He tried the clarinet, but that did not seem cool. Then he decided he wanted to do martial arts. That was fun for a while, but he really was not that coordinated, so he decided that was not for him. However, shortly after his 10th birthday, he finally found an activity that seemed to be the one. Well, that is what he told Mom and Dad when they questioned him about buying paints and an easel, canvases, and all the other tools every good painter needs. David worked extremely hard on his art. Mom and Dad were impressed. The night of the big art show at the community center, David unveiled his painting. For the first time, others were allowed to see his absolute best work. What happened next was unexpected and led David to discover a talent, a gift he never even thought of, and to explore what happens when even your best does not seem quite good enough. I think you'll enjoy meeting David, and I would look forward to visiting with you in our next story time with Nona. Blessings!